So the next command that I'm going to talk about is the polyline command. So you're probably asking yourself, what's the difference between a line and a polyline? Well, if I draw a line and I go from the start point to the end point, and then I draw the next point here, what I'm really drawing is two lines. So that's a line that's got a start point and an end point. This one is a start point and an end point. So they're individual line segments. If I click on this polyline command and I start drawing two lines, just like I did here, you'll see that that's one continuous line segment, and it has a vertex. So that's the start of the line, the end of the line, and it has a vertice in between. So a little bit different in how they're connected and drawn. Now, the other thing that you'll see is when I draw the polyline, on my command line here, I've got some additional functionality, right? So I'm just gonna move this down here so we can see a little bit better. So if I click that first point, you'll notice that it's asking me to specify my next vertex. Now I can change to draw an arc, and if I hit A for arc, it's putting in an arc. Now I can choose different methods and modes for entering my next point. So I can draw an angle, I can go by the center, or I can close it, direction, halfway. So there's a lot of different options. I won't go through all those right now, but you can test it out and try different modes. We'll break this down into individual sub segments to explain the different pieces and show you how you would use those when we actually draw this curve line. But if I was to come in and just pick that next point, you can see I'm still in the arc mode. So what I need to do is go back to my line. So that's the L. I'm going to click on L to go back to drawing a line. Now I can come in and enter. Now what happens though is that's not um, this line I'm drawing is not tangent to that arc. So you just want to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to draw a line this way, and then I can, come off of this with another arc, and I can kind of click here, right? So I can just arbitrarily pick. And you can also do the through point. So if I hit T, I want the arc to go through this particular point here. And now you can see it's kind of holding that point on that arc. And then I can click this next point here, and that's going to create that arc. So with the polyline, you have the ability to create these different type shapes. Now the other one, like with the width, I can do width, and it's going to ask me for my start width. So let's say that I do 0. You can see the default is 0. So if I do 0 and then my end width, let's say, is 5, and I pick that next vertex, you can see that it really creates this neat shape here, right? So the width of the line can be changed as well, and that's what a polyline can be. It can be have different widths. So now when I draw this next point, you can see that it's just a thicker line. So kind of mess around with the polyline. It has a lot of different functionality and tools that you can manipulate. So if I change it back to width of 0, then now that line is back to 0. Oops, I actually messed that up where it actually used the distance from here to here for my end width. So I'm going to type in U to undo that last point. I'm going to make sure I go width again. So my start width is 0 and my end width is 0. And now when I click there, you can see that that line is just that single width. Now if I hit C for close, it'll close that object. So now you can see this is one continuous object that can be manipulated and modified as one continuous object. And what we will do now is we will practice drawing a polyline for this curve line. So you can see this curve line is actually made up of individual arcs and segments. Now there is a command where we can join those together, but what we're going to do is we're going to select this arc. So we're going to zoom in, select that arc, and we're going to go over to our layer manager, and we're going to isolate that layer. So we're going to click on the layer isolate command and isolate layer. So that gives us this polyline or this line. So we're going to use the polyline command, and we're going to actually it doesn't matter what layer. Actually, it does matter what layer it's on. So we're going to go hit escape first. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layer manager, and we're going to create a new layer, and we'll call that polyline. Oh, polyline. And we want to make it current. So we're going to click on activate layer. So that is the current layer. That's the layer that we're going to be drawing on. Now, the other thing I want to do, because I isolated those layers, is I want to show and sort by show. So if I scroll up, you can see that the curve line layer is on, and it's not frozen, so it's visible, but it's unlocked. So we're going to lock it, and then that way we won't be able to be edited when we're drawing. So it'll stay the way it is in case you inadvertently delete a line. Now I'm going to click on the checkbox here to close that. You can see it kind of dims that layer, and notice it when I select it, there's no grips, right? So I cannot edit it or modify that object. So that's going to be helpful for us. When we start drawing the polyline command, it's going to draw it on that, the active layer that we have set. And I'm just going to start by snapping to this endpoint right here. That's going to be our start point. Now you'll see that there's another endpoint here, right? So our endpoints are on, and if your endpoints aren't on and they're not snapping, you want to make sure eSnap is turned on, and you want to click this eSnap settings to make sure endpoint is turned on. Now, if it's snapping all over the place, like intersections and perpendicular, you can toggle these off, and I'll show you how to bring them back on, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap to the endpoint of that line. So see how the cursor, it kind of creates that little glyph there. So I'm going to snap to the endpoint there. So we started that line, and now I want to go into an arc. So if I hit A for arc, right, it's going to start drawing this arc. Now I want that arc to match the arc that's there. So I could just come over here and snap there, but I'm kind of guessing that that's correct. So I do want it to go through this point. So maybe I use the through point like T, and we press enter, and I want it to pass through that particular point right there. And then I can come over to this point here and draw that arc. I'm not sure what happened on that little graphic there. I think that was just a display issue. So now I'm into an arc. Now I need to go back to a line. So I'm going to hit L for line, and I'm going to go to the endpoint of that line segment. And now I can come in here because it is drawing a tangent. If I just go arc, it should match that. And you can see it's not. So what I need to do is do the same thing where maybe I go through point, and I say I want to go through the midpoint of the arc. So you can see I'm snapping to the midpoint, and just ignore that because don't worry about it. It's going to actually snap to the end there, and it's going to draw that arc. And now I don't think there's a tangent point there, but we're going to do the same thing, right? So we're basically just tracing is what we're doing, right? So I'm going to change this to through point, and snap to the midpoint, and then we'll pick the end point, and I'll go line. We'll go back to line, enter, and then pick end. So again, you can practice with that. You could try doing different, arc lengths and whatnot. To get out of the command, you hit escape, and that will draw that line. So now when I pick this line, you can see that it's one continuous line segment. So again, I'm just using this for instructional purposes to show you how you might draw this in. You can be more precise. There's ways to draw construction lines and different things, but I just really want you to focus on understanding how to draw this polyline inside of the CAD viewer inside of Connect.